Hello, and welcome to Under 1000. My name's Thomas Flower, and each episode I'll read you a new piece of flash fiction. All of the stories are 1000 words or less. Today, I'll be reading Depression Magic. Please be aware that this episode contains characters dealing with mental health issues. If that's likely to upset you, or anyone that you're listening with, then you might want to skip this one. I've always had a thing for small tucked away places. Corners and crevices which the rest of the world ignores. There's something about them which fascinates me. I don't know why. I remember when I was a child, my mum would take me to the supermarket. There was a shelf in the back right corner of the shop that seemed to barely ever move or change. Maybe the products weren't very popular, I guess so anyway. But the way people just walked by it made me sad in the most delightful way. I felt so much for those lonely shelves, sitting there week after week while the world moved on by. I don't know if I can even really describe how it made me feel, but it instilled something in me which I've carried for the rest of my life. I love finding other places like that, whenever I can. Little ignored spaces, unimportant to a disinterested world, but fascinating to me. On the subway, there's a small section of the platform past where the trains pull in that nobody ever goes to. In the park, there's a forlorn tree which stands in mud that people never go near. In the city centre, there's a tiny alleyway full of pipes and vents that's almost too narrow to walk down. I love them all. I have noticed, as I've grown older, however, that I usually tend to spot these places when I'm feeling gloomy or down. When I'm happy, the small ignored places don't fascinate me like they do when I'm upset. I guess it's stupid really, but in a heightened emotional state, I feel like I can empathise with them. Of course, a pavement corner doesn't really feel anything if nobody walks on it, but I imagine it does, and I feel sorry for it, and myself. For this reason, I call these finds my depression magic. The one little sprinkle of joy when I'm feeling sad. The knowledge that I might notice some tiny new thing about my surroundings that I'd never stopped to see before. There's an odd beauty to it. One day, when I was at my lowest, I made the most startling discovery of all, however. I had noticed a corner in a room while visiting a friend. The rest of the room was beautifully decorated. Throws and pictures, careful paintwork and cute knickknacks. But for some reason, this one tiny corner stood empty and unloved. I noticed it as soon as I arrived, and when my friend left to get us some drinks, I was gripped by a powerfully irrational desire to go and stand in the corner. I don't know what kind of strange spirit must have possessed me, but doing so was all I could think about, and so I surrendered to the thought. Of course, it was then that I heard my friend returning. I quickly tried to think of some excuse for why I was standing in the corner of the room facing an empty wall and looking to anyone not privy to my strange thoughts like someone quite possibly in the middle of a mental breakdown. But instead of things playing out as I expected, something very strange happened. "Oscar? Where are you?" "That's so weird, he was just in here before," my friend said, setting down the drinks on the table. I stood stock still for a moment, thinking that she must not have seen me, and wondering how to make a graceful exit from where I stood. While I was furiously flipping through options in my mind, however, she turned and looked straight at me, and straight past me. "He must have gone somewhere," she said, while staring at me directly. I was shocked and confused for a moment, until I realised that she couldn't see me. I waited until she left the room, then returned to sit at the table so I could laugh it off as a misunderstanding later. Now though, thanks to that experience, I understand that depression magic is real. When I'm feeling low, if I find an ignorable little corner, I can make myself invisible to the world, unseen by anyone, camouflaged into the vacant spaces I occupy. It's a strange kind of gift, one which I can only gain through misery and suffering. Of course, I tried doing the same trick when I was feeling good. It simply didn't work. People saw me and very clearly expressed their confusion about what they saw. So happiness is not allowed. I can only be invisible when I feel like the world is ignoring and disappointing me anyway. Depression magic is exactly what it is. Still, no matter how painful it may be to access, it's a useful skill to have. The things I've done with it, after all. Heard conversations I never should have been privy to, seen things that others were trying to keep hidden from me, watched the world without it staring back. It's amazing. And sad. The more I do, the deeper I go, realizing the friendly lies and gracious mistruths that others have told me. It's hard to trust your friends when you see the ways in which they say one thing and do another. And so the more I watch, the further I fall into depression, and the more I watch and the further I fall. It's an endless cycle in which I become more and more invisible, until one day, I assume, I too will become a forgotten and ignored thing, standing in the corner, seen by nobody. And I only hope, when that time comes, that someone else might take a moment, stop, and admire the beauty of a place that the rest of the world rushes on past. Thank you for listening to Under 1000. I'm your host, Thomas Flower. To follow the show online, look for Under 1000 Pod on Twitter or Facebook. If you'd like to support the show on Patreon, go to patreon.com/under1000pod, where you can sign up to read each month's stories in advance, as well as to have a thank you be read during these credits. The theme music is an instrumental version of In Between Days by Nick Tate and the Sharks. To hear the full song and more from the same EP, go to Nick Tate, Nictate, and thesharks.bandcamp.com, or search for them on your favourite streaming platform. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and that you'll join me again next time for some more super short fiction.